The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to the webinar on themes that emerged from our fall outreach for the Statewide Housing Plan. My name is Shoshana Oppenheim, and I'm the Planning and Policy Manager at Oregon Housing and Community Services and the Project Manager for the Statewide Housing Plan. I'm joined by Mari Valencia of Enviro Issues and Martine Campos Davis from Oregon Human Development Corporation. Mari participated in outreach with low-income Oregonians, and OHDC led the effort to engage agricultural farm workers in our outreach. All right, first, take care of a few housekeeping details. This webinar will be recorded and available for view later. It will be posted on our Statewide Housing Plan website shortly. If you have a question, you can type it in the box and on your screen, and we will be monitoring questions and answering them at the end of the webinar. As we're developing the statewide housing plan, we knew that we wanted to engage the community in our planning effort. We launched an engagement effort with the goal of gaining a deeper understanding of the housing crisis. Essentially, what's the story behind the data? Before we go too far into the summary of our outreach, we want to answer the question that I'm sure at least a few of you have, which is, where is all the data that you have located? You can find our statewide and countywide profiles on our OHCS website, www.oregon.gov/pages/OSHP.ASPX. If you have any detailed questions about the data, you can email me at hcs.swhp@oregon.gov, and I will work to get your questions answered. And I will give you this information again at the end of the webinar. We did our best to canvass the state, to provide forums, to hear from the community, partners, providers, and developers of affordable housing. We were joined by members of the health community, local governments, activists, and agency partners. We met at city halls and community centers, service providers, hospitals, and housing authorities, and many places in between. OHCS attended 11 industry conferences and partner meetings. We held 22 partner and housing advocate forums and met with 6 tribal communities. We were in every part of the state and reached over 600 people, including 47 by webinar. One trip was over 830 miles and included 5 meetings in 2 days. Mari from Enviro Issues, will you tell us a little bit about what you heard with your focus groups with low-income Oregonians?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Shoshana. So Enviro Issues, we are a consulting firm supporting OHCS with the development of the statewide housing plan. Part of our work involved engaging low-income Oregonians. The Enviro Issues team focused our efforts on hearing perspectives from low-income community members across the state. We were interested in listening, learning, and understanding barriers and challenges faced by low-income Oregonians in accessing human and housing services. This effort brought together a diverse set of low-income community members, including youth, people with disabilities, single parents, families, females, males, people of color, and seniors. In total, 69 Oregonians participated in our discussion groups. To convene these community members, we partnered with community action agencies in 7 different counties, including Deschutes, Coos Bay, Clackamas, Lincoln, Douglas, Harney, and Columbia County. We facilitated the 8 focus group discussions, including one in Spanish, in St. Helens, Oregon City, Newport, Coos Bay, Roseburg, Bend, and Burns from the end of November through mid-December. In all, Participants were overwhelmingly thankful to have been considered in the planning process in the development of the statewide housing plan, and were very excited to be part of the discussion.
Thanks, Mari. Martine, can you tell us a bit about OHDC's trip across Oregon to talk with farm workers about the statewide housing plan?
Sure. Thanks, Shoshana. Oregon Human Development Corporation is a nonprofit organization. We've been operating in Oregon for the past over 30 years, primarily serving farm workers and helping them access services and training to improve their lives. OHCC held farm worker community forums in 6 farm worker-centric communities around Oregon: Ontario, Klamath Falls, Woodburn, Hillsborough, Hood River, and Hermiston. The forums were facilitated by OHDC staff and were done bilingually in Spanish and English. All but one were done in the early evening, and dinner offerings were provided, as well as childcare, in order to facilitate discussions, as we anticipated that many farm workers would be bringing their families. Over 150 farm workers and numerous children contributed to these forums, and they were also encouraged and assisted to fill out the OHCS surveys that were translated into Spanish. Farm workers that were not able to attend were asked to fill out the online surveys at the OHCS website and were assisted by our staff in our offices around the state. We also had 36 representatives from community agencies that participated in these forums. There were some definite housing concerns that came out of these farm worker forums, some that are similar to other populations and some that are unique just to farm workers.
Thanks, Martine. To many of you on the line, it will not be a surprise what we learned, but we thought that the voices that we heard were strong and that we need to amplify what we were told. So in summary, we heard that there is a need for affordable housing across the housing continuum and across all incomes. Housing affordability is elusive across the state. In every community we visited, there is a shortage of safe, decent, and affordable housing. The shortage not only affects extremely low-income Oregonians, but also their families, and it also affects vulnerable populations as well. People are doubling up, living in cramped conditions, or living in their vehicles to avoid being homeless. Wait lists are unbelievably long, and people feel hopeless. Lack of tenant protections and the increasing cost of fees to move into a home were high on the list of things causing this problem. Mari, can you share with us what you heard?
We also heard there is a limited supply of units in many communities. This in turn has allowed landlords to become more selective, and people with poor credit histories, criminal backgrounds, or other screening issues are facing major barriers to finding places to live. High cost of application fees are also having an impact on low-income people looking for housing. Community members identified key populations who are disproportionately affected by housing instability, including seniors and people with disabilities, single-parent households, communities of color, and youth. In every focus group discussion, almost all participants expressed some sort of hardship in securing housing and lots of uncertainty for how long they would have the housing. We heard from a mother about her experience trying to find a home for 2 children, one with disabilities. With tears in her eyes and much anguish, she bravely shared with us that many times she had almost secured housing. However, as soon as the landlord learned about her child's disability, they quickly turned her away or came up with an excuse not to offer her the unit. She expressed feelings of hopelessness, constant distress, pain, and a sense of failure for not being able to secure warmth and a roof over her children's heads. This mother was feeling at a loss, with limited energy to seek out support in response to her experiences. That is just one of many stories.
Unfortunately, too many Oregonians are experiencing hopelessness when it comes to housing. Martine, can you share with us the farm worker perspective?
Sure. We consistently heard of additional barriers faced by farm workers. Application fees, as Mari mentioned, ranged from anywhere from $40 to $60 per adult in the household. Some of those were before they were informed as to how many were on a waiting list, and in many instances, these application fees were not refundable. In areas where farm workers are competing for limited rental units, they find that families are renting bedrooms in houses and apartments, creating overcrowding situations because of the waiting list for subsidized affordable units can be up to 3 years long. The overcrowding creates situations where conflicts arise over space usage, coordinating schedules around work, school, and family. In tourist areas that have significant agricultural activities, rentals are only available for 9 months of the year, and then families have to move out during the high tourist season, as landlords can then charge 4 times the rent in that month during those times. This makes a tight housing market even tighter for farm workers in these areas.
Thank you, Martine. Participants in Oregon Housing and Community Services outreach stated that people are spending almost half their income on rent and other housing costs, and in some cases, up to 60%. A theme that resonated in many communities is the link between housing instability and overall financial insecurity. For example, participants noted that residents living on fixed incomes are increasingly more at risk of becoming homeless, and they have to make tough decisions between rent and other basic necessities like groceries, car insurance, gas, or prescription medication. Across the state, there is concern about the quality of housing stock and the quality of homes and apartments, which has a direct impact on the health and livelihood of many Oregonians. Poor quality homes often have mold, poor insulation, are made of poor quality, and have improperly working systems that add to the monthly bills. In many communities, there's little incentive to upgrade naturally occurring affordable housing because the community rents are low and owners do not see the value of making improvements. The problem of poor quality housing is persistent and as a problem in manufactured and mobile home parks. More than 55% of manufactured homes in Oregon were built before 1980, and construction of homes was unregulated before 1976. The aging stock of manufactured homes is compounded by the instability of not owning the home that the land that the home sits on. Mari, can you tell us more about what you heard about housing conditions?
Yes, in every discussion group, we heard stories about poor housing conditions that people were enduring. And these stories were heartbreaking and so very moving. A story that resonated with us in one of the discussion groups entailed a senior community member experiencing mold, no heat, no hot water, and non-functioning amenities. These conditions resulted in health impacts and skin conditions, with treatment placing her in serious debt and with even more financial burden and instability. She raised the issues to her landlord twice and stopped afterwards because the landlord threatened to evict her for complaining and stated that there were a host of people willing to live in that unit. She didn't attempt to fight back because, after all, it was a roof over her head and warmth to some degree. She mentioned she was paying $860 a month for this poor quality one-bedroom unit. However, thankfully, the community action team in the area is helping this individual with the lawsuit against this landlord. She stated that the support her case manager is giving her is invaluable. This is just one of many similar stories we've heard where community members are living in poor conditions and lots of fear to push back due to the risk of losing the roof over their heads.
Mari, thank you for sharing that important voice with you. Martine, I know that housing conditions was a big topic for your focus groups. Can you please share with us what you learned?
Sure. As was pointed out already, quality of housing is sometimes lacking in a high demand market, and there is less incentive for property owners to maintain or improve existing houses or apartments, as they know it will be rented regardless of the condition. In Eastern Oregon, we had one couple show up at our forum with 2 jars filled with brown water. They said that this water came directly from their kitchen sink. They stated they don't drink the water in their trailers or are afraid of what illness they might get. They would take a 5-gallon water bottle and either fill up at the grocery store or a friend's house. Photos they brought in showing deteriorating water pipes that service their trailer in their trailer park. They stated they complained to the owner and management of the park, but nothing was ever done to address this issue. Again, the extremely low vacancy rate does not incentivize property owners from making improvements in those registered as rentals, and seems to have increased the number of under-the-radar rentals that can be substandard, like converted garages or bedrooms that have suddenly sprouted additional plumbing fixtures and or cooking surfaces.
These stories are all too common and very important to hear. We also heard that across Oregon, there is a need for more permanent supportive housing as an evidence-based practice to address homelessness. We heard that there is a need for funding to develop permanent supportive housing, to pay for ongoing services, and that there are challenges building supportive housing. Community members across Oregon expressed significant concern about people experiencing homelessness in their communities. There were 4 major themes that evolved: the intersection of poverty and homelessness, the lack of shelter, the need for local government engagement strategy, the impact low vacancy rates have on homelessness. Many communities lack a shelter for people experiencing homelessness and long wait lists for many affordable housing programs. Many communities face challenges with homelessness, including the public's perception and the ability to work community-wide, spanning multiple systems such as parks, criminal justice, mental health, and other touch points of people living on the streets. In most communities, there's clear consensus that housing, health, jobs, and transportation are interconnected. Many communities identified the lack of public transportation as an issue. In rural areas, it can be difficult for residents without a car to access jobs, childcare, and services. This dynamic adds additional cost burden for low-income residents, which should be considered when thinking about the ability for individuals and families to build savings. The linkage between economic development, jobs, and housing was referenced in almost all communities. Participants described issues related to the lack of family wage jobs, as well as underemployment in some areas. Mari, this was a big theme in what we heard. Can you share more?
In our focus group discussions, participants expressed an overwhelming state of exhaustion and sentiments of defeat due to the inability to reach self-sufficiency and financial stability. On many occasions, participants expressed how their efforts were never enough. Many stated they worked 2, maybe 3 jobs and found themselves living paycheck to paycheck, always in a crunch to pay rent and utilities, forgoing buying food or other basic necessities, or defaulting on payments. Many people found themselves choosing to opt out of supportive services because accessing the service itself could mean time away from work, transportation costs, and therefore lost income when it is needed most. It was consistently evident that people are facing tough times across the state.
Martine, can you tell us about some of the transportation issues that are impacting the lives of agricultural farm workers?
Sure. We heard from farm workers in the rural areas that while there may be public transportation, those public transportation routes don't often connect from where they live to where they work. So there's an obvious disconnect to getting farm workers to work using public transportation. Some farm workers don't have driver's license because they're not here with legal documentation. So they can't get a driver's license in Oregon. That just adds to their stress level of getting to work and providing for their families. Others are falling in with private contractors that provide rides to and from their workplace and home. But many times these private contractors are unlicensed and creating overcrowded situations in vehicles, oftentimes with not enough seatbelts for everybody to go around.
Thank you for sharing that important information with us. Another issue identified by participants is that state and local policies are seen as barriers to the development of new housing. Some communities have been engaged in housing planning and stated that barriers related to the lack of affordable and available land that is zoned appropriately with infrastructure ready for development prevents them from building affordable housing. In addition, OHCS staff heard that some factors impacting the feasibility of development, such as local fees, system development charges, and the lack of incentives available for developers to achieve financial feasibility. OHCS staff heard from nonprofit partners and agencies and developers of affordable housing that OHCS must strengthen partnerships to align our programs with the work that is being done in the community. The need for flexibility in every aspect of the department's work was a recurring theme in our outreach sessions. To be a strong partner, OHCS needs to consider and be responsive to the unique needs of various communities and to see the differences in local needs. Participants highlighted the need to include affordable home ownership as part of the overall housing strategy and the continuum of housing options for Oregonians. Lack of supply is a major barrier in many communities for prospective first-time home buyers, causing people to return down payment assistance dollars simply because they can't find a home in their price range. Participants overwhelmingly noted that the high cost of rent also makes it difficult to save money for a down payment and keep people stuck in the rental market. All three of these efforts for the statewide housing plan outreach confirm what we know, that the housing crisis is truly affecting every community in every part of the state. Many Oregonians have limited or no choices when it comes to where to live. Too many Oregonians are living in poverty or can't find a stable, healthy place to call home. Rental housing has become more out of reach than ever before, and home ownership is becoming harder to achieve and maintain. Innovation is what's needed to address the housing crisis. We must be more effective and coordinated in bringing solutions to our partners and the communities that they serve. I want to take a minute to talk about how this all fits into our planning efforts and to describe how our statewide housing plan is organized. The plan is organized into 4 parts. The problem statement, which is essentially our needs statement, and where we plan to understand the depth and impact of the need for housing and shelter services. The tools section is where we are looking at what resources are available to address the need. Priorities and investment strategies will include how we can apply the tools to get the most return for Oregonians. And then there will be an implementation plan that outlines how we are going to get it done and how the public can hold us accountable. Together, this work will guide our work at Oregon Housing and Community Services and improve our ability to provide housing resources and services to low-income Oregonians. Before we go, I want to provide our schedule at a glance, and you can see where we are and where we're going. Just this month, we expect to receive our environmental scan and gap analysis. This information will be one of the considerations that we use to determine how to make strategic investments that will lead to better outcomes for low-income people and the people served by our programs. In the summer, we will consider investment recommendations based on the scan and alternative considerations. You should see a draft of the plan in the fall and have an opportunity to engage with us about how the draft plan meets the needs that we have set out for you today. Our goal is to have a final plan ready for the Housing Stability Council to accept by the end of the calendar year. Thank you so much for participating in our webinar. Feel free to email me at hcs.swhp@oregon.gov with your questions about today's presentation and our planning efforts. Thank you so much.